Welcome once more to episode number 21 of the Creative Outlet Podcast. I am your host. I am Brandon Pudwill, the host of every episode so far, and then some. Today is February 3rd, 2023, and geez, what on earth happened in year 3? I mean, this is wrapping up year 3. I could make any number of excuses if I really wanted to, and I'm sure some of them could seem legitimate, but I'm not really interested in giving a bunch of excuses. I am interested in primarily moving forward, but the bottom line, as far as where I've been, is I haven't really been in a place to record, and that's in two different senses. That's in a physical sense, in that I, for a large part of the year, quite literally had no studio in 2022, or at least no space that I would consider to be acceptable for a studio, and I just haven't really been mentally prepared to work on this show. As I talked about in episode number 20, which did just release yesterday, which, funnily enough, was exactly a year when the prior official episode 19, had released in 2022. That was an entirely unintentional coincidence, but that is when it came out. I talked about how I was going to be looking for jobs shortly, and that's largely what 2022 consisted of: looking for, and then getting a job, and then, starting to work said job. So I guess we should go into a little bit more about what's happened since episode 19 and now, and episode 20 is completed. It is up. And of course, if you can hear this, you can hear episode 20. So it has to be up before then. And, it ended up coming up in February. Now, this year's wrap up comes out in February, which is like last year's. And I would rather would have had it come out in January, but that long belated episode not only chronologically needed to come first, it's been sitting around for a long time, and I wanted to get it out regardless. Like I said, another big change has happened in the last 365 days. I'm a graduate. Not only did I graduate, but I'm formally employed now in what some would call a quote-unquote real job, with air quotes around it. And I don't know if I've talked about it much on here before, but the wording of calling something a real something, especially when it comes to something like work or degrees or such, things that are important in life, it's not really a phrasing I like to use, but it's the easiest way, I think, for people to kind of understand that I've started like a career-y type job. I don't have any plans to discuss work from now on. I felt comfortable doing that with a job like I had before, again, a not quote-unquote real job, but now I need to have a lot more security, of course, because I'm doing things like living on my own, because, of course, with a job comes a place to live, which comes, in theory, with a studio, and I need to keep that first and foremost. Otherwise, then I really, really, really can't do stuff like this, and that wouldn't be that would be a pretty bad situation to be in. And like I said, I have a studio, but it's still not an ideal studio. This is still in my bedroom, because I only have a bedroom, a bathroom, and a kitchen, living room, which is to say there's not really any separation between the kitchen and the living room. So it was basically work in this room or work with nothing. And on that same theme of this not being ideal, I really, really hope you can't hear this, because I've turned the gain down pretty much as I can on the mic that I'm using, the Yeti. But I do live directly next to a highway now, and so that could result in some like car noises. That was my best attempt at trying to do a motor, or at least my very first attempt at trying to mimic a motor. I really hope you can't hear it. If you can, it's just gonna be the reality for a little bit, but that is what it is. Another small hurdle I've had for the last few months, I should point out, I won't have internet for another 13 days. And I've lived where I've been since practically November, so even if I could work on stuff, it would have been a real big challenge to upload, and I do have a plan to circumvent that. Obviously, episode 20 came out despite the fact that I don't have internet, but it's definitely still an obstacle. And in fact, folks can see that if they've happened to see the description for episode 20 on the audio podcast side, you'll notice it currently says description coming soon with asterisks surrounding that. And that's because the mobile editor for Anchor.fm is really not that great. I like a lot of other things about it as a service, but I cannot format the description the way I want to, and it is unacceptable for me that I cannot hit an enter key to do any kind of formatting. So after February 16th, when I have the capability of uploading via my computer, then I'm going to edit that to be like it has in the video description of the episode, because the video for episode number 20 is the way that I would want it to be, with everything written as it is supposed to be. But still, I can at least get something out, even if it isn't exactly fully how I want it to be yet. And yeah, I mean, it took until now, but I feel prepared to record, and even better than that, I also do have another episode, which was originally going to be planned to be 21, but then some things came up in December, but I already have that planned. So shortly after this, I can already record episode 22, and it's based on a theme that I noticed in 2022. I'm going to reference it here a little bit, and I suppose it's appropriate for episode 22 that it's about a theme I noticed in the year 2022. Lots of twos. And, of course, another thing that's happened in that time is there's all kinds of news that I've wanted to cover. And normally I would squeeze sort of quick news here at the end of toward the end of the intro. This isn't really the end of the intro, but it's getting there. But since there's a lot that I would have wanted to cover in 2022, I'm going to stick that sort of thing at the end here in a bit. And more. There will be more in a bit there after this next opening question, which is, what kind of goals do I have for 2023, year number 4 of the Creative Outlet podcast? And at this point, I'm kind of wary to make goals for this show, because I made goals in the first year, I made goals in the second year, I've made goals in the third year, and they have had a very challenging time materializing. But I'm going to try to do it anyway. My big goal right now, I know I've said this a billion times before, but I want to record every 2 weeks, and I want to transition more into focusing on primarily game news. So I'm going to keep track of the things that happen in the industry and make notes on those. I do have other goals, but I want to that kind of tie into that. And obviously that's not necessarily super different from the stuff that I've covered in the past, but I've made a lot more extended work, and I want to. Being timely isn't necessarily my focus with it. It's mostly that I want to make sure that I consistently make stuff. Other plans. Another thing I've talked about a lot, but I want to do a big technological upgrade. I plan to get a tower PC for the purposes of recording and editing. The laptop I've used for the last few years, it's served me well, but boy oh boy is it not ideal, because it is a potato. I cannot run a proper editor on this thing to save my life, and I can't run proper recording software outside of Audacity probably on this, and in that sense this piece really isn't that ideal, and so I want to upgrade to something better. I will have support in getting myself this computer, because it's essentially my graduation, birthday, Christmas present from a certain segment of my family, and I'm very, very grateful for that, because obviously a tower PC it's a huge investment, especially now. Not that PCs were ever cheap, even back in the day, but I'm used to having a device that's like $350, and I want to upgrade to something that requires that fourth digit in cost, so to speak. I was also gifted a mixer slash interface. It's kind of unclear. It says it's a professional mixer, but the manual mentions it has an interface in it. And assuming that's the case, that means it's time for an XLR mic. I'm glad to have had all the work that the Blue Yeti has put me through the years, but I know it's not the best microphone. I know that analog signals from XLR microphones are considered to be better, and I want to experiment more with that type of hardware, so I want to get an XLR. At the very least, I want to get a pod mic, the Rode pod mic. That's about the same price as this anyway, $100. But in the long run, what I want to get, my ideal mic is the Electro Voice RE20. And the reason I've picked that one is because that's actually the mic that I used for the other podcast I mentioned, for sure in episode 20, possibly another time or two before that. And I liked it a lot. I liked the way it sounded on my voice, and I would like to continue using it. So if I have the funds such that it would allow me to get an RE20, great. If I have to settle for the Rode pod mic for a little bit, that's also fine. But we'll have to cross that bridge when I get there. And finally, I want to get a capture card this year. This is another thing I've talked about a billion times. They're really not that expensive, or at least the one I want to get isn't that expensive. So I want to get that because it would just be nice to have some long-form gameplay footage for me to put over if I'm ever talking about an individual game. An unplanned hardware upgrade, I need some new headphones. I am using the headphones I've used for the last couple of years, these One Audio Pro 10, I think they are. I'll double check on that. I don't want to give false information as far as the headphones I'm using. And they've lasted me 2 years, but now they have a joint problem, which is apparently a documented issue with these headphones. The right, what is it? The right, not like the joint as far as the turning in to like collapse these joint, but one of the joints seems to have snapped on here. I will try to provide a picture for the video folks. They have an idea of what I mean, but they have officially become really annoying to wear, especially because, as folks will know who have watched the video show, I like to adjust my headphones a lot, not because I like messing around with something. Although I have found I am a bit of a fidget person a little bit. Really, it's just these things can become uncomfortable, even with the extension I've done from the top toward where they are now. It gets uncomfortable, and I think that might be what's caused it to snap, unfortunately. So I'm in the market for a new pair of headphones. I'm thinking similarly of using the ones that I used for that other show I did. It's a Sony series of headphones, the MDH or MDR of some kind. It was a really comfortable pair. I didn't need to adjust those nearly as often as I did for the other ones. Let's see. I thought I had it pulled up here. The Sony MD... I know it's MD some kind of thing, but I just want to make sure I have the exact correct ones that I used. Except, of course, I have no internet, so I have to wait based on whatever the Wi-Fi, or not the Wi-Fi, the data can get me at. The MDR 7506s, that's right. Those are the ones that I like. I recognized it from the picture. Okay, last goal, right? As far as production, I want to make some more truncated notes. I think the obstacle for me, as far as having a desire to work on this show, is pre-production. I mean, post-production kind of can be too, but on that front, and this is also true of pre-production and why I think it I need some extra motivation for it, is I need to curb my perfectionism. You know, that bit where I was looking for the headphones, that was very clear, 100% absolute improvisation where I have nothing to go off of. But I've had the opposite problem in the past a lot, where it's like I have too detailed of notes that go on for 20 pages, and even this goes on for 13 pages, this episode here, and that's still a little bit longer than I like. But I need to curb that perfectionism. I need to curb that ability, or that desire to just have all kinds of notes for me to go off of when I'm recording, because then I can have a more conversational show, and then I won't spend hours and hours and hours and hours and hours on end writing when I really want to get to the recording. Let's see. If possible, this is I'm probably not going to get to this. I'd be interested in learning more about compressors, and I'd like to see if I can obtain like a physical one or a noise gate sort of deal, because especially with this dumb highway behind me, well, I shouldn't say it's dumb. I drive on it and I like it, but it makes noise, and if I can get rid of that noise, and if I can do anything like physically that would make it easier for editing, so I don't have to mess with the sound or like the volume too much, or the gain. I'm not sure exactly which one of those would be right for this particular instance, but you get the idea. I just want to make it easier so that I don't have to spend time going on with like keyframes and such and adjusting the audio when I just want to have a good recording the first time. That could be a pipe dream. It could be something that I just need to wait on for a much longer point, but it makes things a little inconvenient. I'm also sure you notice once more the lack of video if you're watching this on youtube.com, right? My studio, which, as I mentioned, is in my bedroom, is probably the space in my living quarters that is the least prepared right now. Honestly, if you folks could see what I am surrounded by, I think you might be a little bit upset, because I have been here for a few months now, and moving takes forever to really end, is the big lesson I've learned in this process, especially when you're moving officially 2 rooms into a single place. So, I need to get rid of stuff, and that could be donating things, that could be actually throwing stuff away, that could be just putting some stuff in a storage unit, but I need some stuff to be gotten rid of out of here. It'd also be nice if I had a full desk. I'm using a single piece of this desk that I have, or that I will have, that's put together. I do not have the full desk. It is a project that would require 2 people to be put together successfully, but for what I have right now, it works, and it just is what it is. So, if I can get in some visual gags here, I will. Maybe some references. If I can get, I'm definitely going to put in that headphone picture. If I can get in some gameplay, depending on some of the things I talk about later, I will. It will probably be limited to some long form stuff if I can, but we'll see what I get to. And, I'm not sure how long this is going to go on yet, but I've considered maybe I need to cut down on topics. Like, I like the 2-hour-long episodes, but I think that might be another obstacle. Is I think I've finally accepted that having episodes that are that long seems like a very daunting task when I go into the editing room, as if I had my own editing room, or at least just when I go into the editing process, and it definitely, I think it prevents me from sitting down and just cranking out what I need to do. And that's not to say that, I'll never find 4 topics for an episode, but I need to truncate my writing such that I don't spend forever on a single topic, and I'm able to get out the content I need to get out for the purposes of making a show like this. So in line with that goal, and it kind of works out since this is more so the modus operandi for these yearly wrap-ups, I have 2 topics in mind today. Yes, we have hit the end of the introduction. We're going to be talking about my 2022 Game of the Year nominees and the 3 categories that I have for them. And we're going to do a year-end wrap-up, as is tradition for these wrap up episodes. Let's just immediately jump in with my Game of the Year 2022 topics. As folks will know, I have 3 categories, or at least you would know if you've listened to prior episodes of this. I have my 2022 release of the year, or at least it'll be given year release of the year in the future. So this year it'll be 2023 release of the year. We have my personal game of the year, and the difference between those 2 categories is my 2022 release of the year needs to be a new game that released in 2022. It can't be a game that I played in 2022. It can't be a remake of a game that came out before. It can't be a collection of older games. It has to be an original work for the given year. My personal game of the year can, on the other hand, include those remakes. It can include re-releases. It can include a collection, and it can include games that came out prior to 2022. And then the last category, my unique one that I think I've come up with, but I doubt this is an original idea necessarily. After all, it's tough to find truly original ideas. But it's the Backlog MVP, the most valuable player on my backlog list. It's essentially the game that I most want to play next, or would most want to return to if I've started it. And in this case, in this year, I've broken tradition because I have started this game, but it's remained on my backlog because after the brief time in which I did play it, I haven't really gone back to it. So with those rules, those guidelines, that brief description of what my Game of the Year topic or Game of the Year categories are, let's just jump right in with my 2022 release of the year. And I have a controversial choice, but this is the game that I've had the most fun with in 2022. And that game is Nintendo Switch Sports. And it does exactly what I wanted. Well, it does more what I would have wanted from the Wii Sports games in the Wii era and the Wii U era to an extent. The game does exactly what it says on the tin. It's a multiplayer-centric sports game, in this case with online. And as a result, I can play a game effectively like Wii Sports online. And that's something that I would have wanted years ago. Years and years ago, when the original Wii Sports came out and the Nintendo Wi-Fi connection was already a thing. The fact that there were plenty of multiplayer games on that console that were still restricted to local play is just baffling to me. I didn't mind it at the time, but looking back on it, it's a major flaw of the Wii hardware. And the fact that other games in the same series include online play is just frustrating. So this game really fulfilled a dream for me. Now, to be fair, Wii Sports Club on the Wii U did have online play as well, but there weren't a ton of people who bought Wii U's, let alone Wii Sports Club, because they probably already had a Wii and had Wii Sports, and therefore didn't need Wii Sports Club. So playing online in that game, even though it was, in theory, something you could do, it isn't something that would actually have been able to work out in practice. And I don't want to give the misimpression here that I think Nintendo Switch Sports is some perfect game. That I do think there are flaws with it. One thing that was a major kerfuffle at the time when the game released and even at its reveal were the new characters of the Sportsmates. And the critique of them is that they're not the most interesting, they're not the most visually appealing, they're honestly kind of generic, sort of just bubbly, sort of anime-ish characters like you have in a game like Ninjala. And I don't love that, but I have the alternative in that I can still play as my Mii, and I was going to do that anyway had the game not included Sportsmates. And it's an option when you boot up the game, so that critique as far as them not being super visually appealing doesn't really hold water for me. As much as I understand where people come from with it. I think the fact that I have that alternative and the fact that there are different bodies you can unlock in the game, whether it's like a hamburger head or a robot body or the squirrel body, that makes the generic design of the base character not really register for me as that important of an issue, even though I can see where other people, if they prioritize that as an aspect, if they prioritize the fact that you can only play as your Mii and the style of the Mii world in games like Wii Sports Resort as important to them, to the identity of a quote-unquote Wii Sports game, I can see where that would come from with that. But for me, that isn't what I needed. And really, the game is still just 7 sports without too many new modes. And coming off of a game like Wii Sports Resort, I also understand the frustration of that game had a dozen sports. Why doesn't this game have a dozen sports? And I think that's a completely 100% legitimate critique, right? I would have preferred had the game have more sports. But the experience that I did get, I think, was superior to the experience I got in the original Wii Sports, and is something I'd be more likely to return to than Wii Sports Resort. But that game will always have the advantage of having its unique modes that aren't in Nintendo Switch Sports. Like, for me, Survival Bowling and Survival Golf, which also, to be fair, those 2 modes have the advantage of being 2 sports that I would play in real life and enjoy a lot. Those 2 modes are some of the most fun online modes in gaming that I've played. And I know I've mentioned earlier I haven't had internet. I have had the ability to use a mobile hotspot, which has allowed me to do things like update Nintendo Switch Sports since the golf update has come out. But I also only have 5 gigabytes of data to use, so that stuff can get eaten up really quickly. So it's mostly been like, I just want to try something online for a little bit, not something that I've been able to regularly use. And let's see, I would contend the largest factor, though, toward me picking Nintendo Switch Sports as my 2022 release of the year is thinking in the bigger picture outside of it just as a game, outside of the fact that I think it's fun, outside of the fact that I enjoy the modes, outside of the fact that I enjoy collecting the cosmetics that you get by playing online, even though I don't think that's anything ideal. And especially the fact that they're timed as far as you can only get them for 3 weeks is a major frustration that I have with it. And with other games, just watch my Crash Team Racing Nitro Fuel discussion to hear more about that. I just had so much fun with the game on its own that didn't detract. But aside from all of that, thinking of the bigger picture, Nintendo Switch Sports reinvigorated my appreciation for the original Wii and motion control in general. I can say within the year 2022, after Nintendo Switch Sports came out, well, and after I came home and had access to any of my games on Wii and Wii U again, I've played more games on Wii and Wii U in the last year than I probably have in the last 5 years. Now, to be fair, I can't say I've also played tons that are super duper motion control games. Like, I haven't played the original Wii Sports again because I have Nintendo Switch Sports, but I booted up games like Mario Party 8 again, which I haven't done in a while, and that's a very motion control based game. I booted up Wii Party, again, another party game with major motion controls. On the Wii, I booted up Fortune Street, and I've played that, let's see, it was just barely after Christmas, and I've looked at the timer on the game. I've played that game for 40 hours in the last month, which is something that I didn't really think about doing at all prior to this, because playing games on Wii hasn't really been on my radar. But I think thanks to Switch Sports, doing things like that is again. And I want to thank the game for reigniting my interest in that. I hope it continues. That's something that I'd be interested to see in 2023, is if I go back and play more of those games, especially some more of those unique motion control based games. but I think the spark has been started again. Some other nominees. So a recurrent theme in the last year, if you'll remember from watching the 2021 Game of the Year segment, there was an issue in that episode where it's like, geez, I've struggled to find new or original games that I played in a given year. And this sort of happened again in 2022, but 2022 was doubly better than 2021 was for it, because I was able to find at least double the number of original games that I played compared to 2021. But anyway, other nominees go to games that I've considered for this, but they didn't quite have that impact for me that, in this case, Nintendo Switch Sports had. The first nominee I have is Sonic Frontiers. And it's a game that came out late in the year, so I did not have a ton of opportunity to play it, but the little bit that I did play of Sonic Frontiers, I enjoyed quite a bit. The long and short of its nomination for this spot, though it didn't win, is that I see a lot of potential in me enjoying that game a lot. Because I see it as like the bridge between a game like Super Mario Odyssey, which I love, and The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild that scares me. Because Sonic Frontiers is not only a platformer with, it doesn't actually have worlds, but it does have a large world that's split between multiple islands. So like Super Mario Odyssey, it's an open world style platformer that's still split into worlds such that the game isn't too overwhelming for someone like me. But each world, each island, is a sort of Breath of the Wild-like world. And I think it could help me ease into a game like Zelda, which I've put off for years. I still don't even own a copy of it. And it also just helps that I find 3D platformers fun. I find Sonic in particular fun because it is faster than a game like Mario. As much as I love and adore Mario, nostalgia trumps all, I suppose. But I think Sonic Frontiers has the potential to be not only a revolutionary Sonic game for the audience, as it's been reviewed to be for people who really, really like Sonic, actually focusing on story deeply again and giving depth to the side characters in the game, and also just being a fun 3D platformer despite its issues like pop-in. I could see it really sticking out for me, but I need to play it more first. Another 3D platforming game. You'll notice that a lot of these games fit into that same genre. It's Kirby and the Forgotten Land. And that was a game that I know tons of people loved in 2022. But another recurring theme I've seen over the last couple of years, and I think 2022 is really deep for this, is having some games getting blown out of proportion, in my view. And actually, that's not exactly the focus of episode 22, but it's near that. And I think Kirby and the Forgotten Land fits the description of getting blown out of proportion, getting put on a higher stature than I think it is. I think it fits that description to a T. I think it's a good game, but I saw many claims that Kirby and the Forgotten Land is the template for like all future Kirby games. It's exactly what we want. It's amazing. It's perfect. It's mind-blowing. And I think it's good, but it's not there. And I should say, those claims are more so in the really Kirby-liking audience. I can't say I read a ton of reviews for the game, but I know Kirby's usually been underestimated by outlets like IGN, GameSpot, and the such, because it is too easy and blah, 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 things that I would contend aren't really real critiques for Kirby, because that's kind of at least partially the point. And, I've enjoyed what I played. In fact, compared to last episode where I mentioned I didn't even get the game yet. I now own it. I did get it for my birthday. I bought it myself. But since picking it up and finishing the first 2 worlds, I think the 3rd world as well, or at least I've come really close, all 100%, I've enjoyed what I played, but I haven't really felt super compelled to go back. In fact, I would say I'd probably sooner go back to Kirby Star Allies, which I know that is a really, really hot take. But I just, and especially because I have actually completely completed Kirby Star Allies outside of getting the puzzle pictures. But I haven't felt hooked into Kirby and the Forgotten Land. I've kind of played it because I felt obligated to play it because I like Kirby a lot and I want to play all the games. And again, I've had fun. I've had moments where I've thought, oh, that was enjoyable, but it hasn't gotten me the same way that it got others. And, that's fine. And honestly, I think one of the big reasons, and you can call it petty or whatever, but I think the fact that it's more akin to a game like Super Mario 3D World rather than a game like Super Mario Odyssey is majorly what held it back from being the game that others see it as being revolutionary, because going stage to stage in a linear fashion is fine, but I've come to realize I prefer limited open sandbox worlds when I think of 3D platformers. And if had Kirby and the Forgotten Land been designed like that, where there were multiple worlds with big objectives in each level, but still the same world overall, I think I would have enjoyed it more. That's not necessarily the case. It could just be that for whatever reason the game just hasn't pulled me in, and I can't explain why. But I think had the game gone more with that style, I would have enjoyed it more. And now we reach the big upset. I famously predicted when there had been a release date finally announced for this game to be in 2022 that I was going to say Freedom Planet 2 2022 release of the year, period, guaranteed, no question about it. And I should say it has been nominated in another category in this topic. But if you know the rules from previous episodes, you know which one has to be the other option for me, right? I don't want to go much into it yet because I wrote a lot of notes about that game, but it's been nominated elsewhere, and I'm just going to leave it there. I was really hoping it would be Game of the Year, but it did not meet that for me. And so with all the 2022 Release of the Year games covered, it's time to talk about my personal Game of the Year. And the game that I nominated, or that has won Personal Game of the Year, is Hypnospace Outlaw. Now, if you haven't listened to episode 20, and you really should, because you should listen to these in chronological order, this is a game that I actually played for one of the last classes I took in college, video games and learning. And I first learned of Hypnospace Outlaw. I first saw it in the review of it by Nitro Rad, and that's actually part of that's the video that helped me learn about the game, and part of what inspired me toward picking it, because I felt from what I heard in the review that there were a lot of things that I could pull from it toward the paper I had to write in the end. And now, to be fair, right? It's not just that it had an interesting premise, right, and that I could pull a lot of stuff from it. I had fun playing it, right? So I suppose I should maybe go into that premise a little bit in case you haven't listened to that episode. The long and short of it is in an alternate universe where in 1999, or an alternate timeline 1999, computers progressed in a different way, and the internet progressed in a different way from how we experience it. Instead, you go online using headbands that you put on your head, and as you sleep, you surf the internet. Some people need to play more or less a moderator on this internet, on Hypnospace, as it's called. And so you play as a member of the HSPD, the Hypnospace Patrol Department, and more or less police interactions that go on the internet in 5 different categories. Copyright infringement, harassing behavior, illegal content, and that includes things like jump scares. There's malicious content, And that's really just a way of saying like malware, viruses, things that people are putting out that are bad to download, and extra legal commerce. And I basically in the last episode I likened that to Bitcoin. It's not really a real currency, but you can use it in the same way, and some places sanction it. So it's outside of regular legal bounds, and that I think already is just an interesting premise. And I think the game was certainly enhanced by the fact, if I could speak, that I had to analyze it. In fact, it could be unfair that I've chosen this for my 2022 personal game of the year, because if I hadn't had to do that, A, I might not have never played it, and B, I might not have had to really think about it this extra deep, but the fact that I did enhanced it beyond a game that I just thought, oh, that was really fun. And I'm not certain I would have avoided doing some of the analysis I did for Hypnospace Outlaw. Well, I'm certain I would have avoided doing the formal written analysis, but I'm not certain I would have avoided thinking about the topics that the game pursues in the way that I did. And, that's why I love Ace Attorney and other plot-driven games, is because you can read them like books and you can read them like movies. But a game like Hypnospace Outlaw is special because the lessons it teaches, or the questions it suggests you ponder, are the only kinds that you can have that work in a game. So, what I would consider to be sort of the major theme of the game is what is just moderation. What is just in the just way to regulate how things are going on the internet. What makes moderators legitimate, and by extension, what makes their coercive forces on the internet legitimate. And these probably sound like highfalutin questions, but I do seriously believe that the game considers these topics. I would again suggest you listen to episode 20 to hear more on my discussion of it. And admittedly, I do need to go back to this game. I stopped playing it not too long after the class finished, but I've continued to think about it quite a bit. I've thought about especially the first case of the game. I talked about that a lot in the prior episode, but just the fact that in such a simple case of copyright infringement, the fact that that's a thing that I need to police, already that's a major question mark for people on the internet. Is, how are we able to create fan art or fan fiction or fan games and all that stuff without committing copyright infringement? How am I able to make videos without infringing on the copyright on a game in my case, right? How am I able to make a podcast discussing something if I can't show, in the case of the video version, the footage of the game that I want to show? And I can't. But is it really just for myself to be censored, for me to get something like a copyright strike because I need or want to show that footage? I would say no. And Hypnospace Outlaw in the first case considers that exact sort of thing, because you can, you do need to remove 6 examples of copyrighted materials on a character's page. But the amount that's on there can go so far as to let you flag that profile and just get them kicked off of Hypnospace entirely. And while I certainly, in my own life, wouldn't think it would be right to have something like a copyright strike, the fact that I could get totally kicked off, in addition, adds an additional layer of consideration. And if I wouldn't want that to happen to me, why would I do that to somebody, even if they're a fake person, just a character in a game, right? And even more so, the fact that I have that power to do that, I can do that. That's something that Hypnospace Outlaw wants you to consider. You have the power to make these choices. Are they the right choices? Are they just choices? Or are you just following the rules because they're the rules you're told to follow? Some other nominees. These ones I picked more because I thought they were really, really fun. Not that Hypnospace Outlaw isn't fun. That's not what I'm saying at all. But these are games that I played a bunch because I enjoyed them throughout the year, because I simply wanted to have fun with them. And I have to say, Bandai Namco cleaned up in 2022. I mean, I already like Bandai Namco, but I bought far more Bandai Namco games in 2022 than I probably have in any other year. Except they're all remakes and they're all collections. So, the earliest one I picked up was Pac-Man Museum Plus. I was already excited for it from 2021, hearing that it was even announced. But, you know, when I got it, I enjoyed it even more than I did. And I do like it a lot, but as many have pointed out, it does have things like emulation issues. They haven't really affected me all that much, but it doesn't make them the ideal way to play it. The Switch version, which is the one that I picked up, and I picked it up on a cartridge because of course I did, it's $10 extra for the cart. And I don't think there's really a good reason for that version to be $29.99 when the other versions are $19.99, other than just, the cartridge costs more to make. But I can't imagine it costs that much more to make that it needs to cost $10 extra, Bandai Namco. And to be fair, the digital version is $20 across the board, so, you know, I guess I could have downloaded it, but I like cartridges. I like them a lot. As far as my own personal issues with the game, to me, Pac-Man Museum Plus is only really as useful as its newly remade games. You know, I can already play Pac-Man. I could have already played Pac-Man on the Switch through the Namco Museum on there. I can already play Super Pac-Man. I can already play Pac-Mania in many different ways. And that isn't inherently an objective flaw with the game, because if, you know, somebody wants to play all these Pac-Man games, but they don't already have prior collections, like if I had been born in 2010 as opposed to 2000, and I was just turning 12 and I didn't have a collection like this before, that would have been really useful to me. So that's certainly no objective flaw. In some ways, I think Namco's like obligated to put those games in. But for my purposes, if I'm going to rate it as my personal game of the year, it would have had to have had a greater focus on obscure Pac-Man games, or just games that hadn't been remade. And, you know, I like the things that are on there that were remade. I adore the Pac-Man arrangements, and I adore Pac-Man Battle Royale, and I adore Pack-and-Roll Remix. I think it could have been even better if they included even more games that are like that are like those, instead of just, okay, well, we have to put in Pac-Man, we need to put in Super, we need to put in, you know, Pac and Pal, and just go through the motions of games that have already been included in collections a ton of times before. But, you know, I've had fun with the game despite it not being ideal. Another Bandai Namco remake I have to point out, Pac-Man World Repack. This is just a solid remake all around. And first, I want to give props for two things. One, the Switch version is the same price even on cartridge as the other versions, and it includes, the Switch version specifically, I'm fairly certain, includes an all-important mode that I think practically every game on the console should have, and that's performance mode. Okay? Developers, I'm just putting this out there. I will always take a game that doesn't look quite as good if it performs at 60 frames per second. Now, that's not an excuse to make an ugly game, but Pac-Man World Repack is one of like 2 games that I own that has that mode. The other one is Fire Emblem Warriors, and I enjoy that game too, especially because I can play it at 60 frames per second consistently. Now, of course, I do have to dock this remake for not crediting the original staff upon its release, but thankfully there was an update that corrected that. It also, I should say, improved the music quality, because for some reason this music that was able to fit on a PlayStation 1 CD kept that same compressed quality from the PlayStation 1 CD, even though this is on new hardware. And about 20 or so years later, so I don't know what was up with that, but at least the update fixed that. The music sounds better now, and the sound better now. But honestly, for me, the fact that Pac-Man World Repack happened at all was the biggest pleasant surprise of 2022. Because the first Pac-Man World is the one that I've played the least by far. And I figured that after having Museum Plus come out earlier in the year, that there's no way that any other Pac-Man game was going to come out in 2022. And it did. So I figured it was going to be a surprise left for this year, but no, it came out in 2022 and I had all kinds of fun with it. At the end of the day, though, Pac-Man World Repack is still the original Pac-Man World, which is only a fine game. It's a 7 out of 10 game, which I consider to be the bare minimum of a good game. It's a good game. But it's nothing revolutionary. It's a 3D platformer that's more like a 2D platformer because it only has an inch of depth. You don't have true sprawling worlds like Super Mario 64 or Super Mario Odyssey. And it goes back to that same critique I had of Kirby and the Forgotten Land. Only in this case, it's a little bit more acceptable because it is a PlayStation 1 game. At its core, it's a PlayStation 1 game. It's not a new game that can completely fit all kinds of open worlds, regardless. And, there's just little things about it that I would like better if they weren't the case. Like, Miss Pac-Man's gone, and Miss Pac-Man's going to probably be gone forever or until Namco fully obtains the rights to the character, and that's annoying. And at games, I don't want to talk about it, but it's annoying. I like the Pac-Mom character they have in there, but I want the original characters. I like them even better because they're who were already in the game. On the controls, I think I like, because I do have the original Pac-Man World on PS1, I think I like the controls better, but there's also something about them that feels kind of artificial. Like, I can't quite put into words how the game feels to play, but it feels good yet inorganic at the same time. Like, I don't know, maybe the animations just don't line up with the actual physics and the movements, and just something about it feels a little bit off. It's just odd. And I also think some elements, as far as being changes, weren't really that necessary. Like, when you obtain a power pellet, you turn into like this giant Mega Pac-Man, and I don't think that was really needed. It's not a big deal. It's not like it ruins the game for me, but I thought the way it was originally was fine anyway. So I don't know why they felt the need to change that. And I have a lot of critiques, but I've also played the game halfway through already, which is very far for me to play a game on its initial, like during its initial release period. Like, I did that mostly in August, a little bit in September. So clearly Pac-Man World, and as a result, Pac-Man World Repack, has done something to hook me in for that long and to be interested in going back to it sooner rather than later. Which is more than I can say for Kirby. Not that I mean to keep harping on Kirby, but Pac-Man World it did that. It did the linear 3D platformer better than I thought Kirby did. And bottom line, like the original version, Pac-Man World Repack is flawed, but it was an enjoyable experience. Now, there is a third Bandai Namco game that came out in 2022, specifically a third remake that I will have as a topic here, but it didn't end up on my personal game of the year list, which I find interesting. I mean, it is definitely a personal game of the year, but it fit better in the final category I'm going to be going into here shortly. But I do have two other nominees that I want a quick touch on. First up, this year I obtained a game that eluded me for a long time, which is the original Clubhouse games. And like 51 Worldwide Classics on Switch, I think this is a fantastic collection of simple games, and I played it for quite a bit in 2022. That game doesn't have a time tracker as far as I'm aware, so I don't know how many hours I played it, but it definitely felt like, despite how not having the game for super long, I got it in late September. I enjoyed it a lot, but I couldn't bring myself to nominate it for my personal game of the year because I think a lot of its allure for me just comes from the fact that it's a DS game that I was interested in when the DS was still relevant. So we're talking like 2007, 2008, I felt this, but it eluded me. And that's not to say there's nothing fun with it or nothing in it that I think is better than 51 Worldwide Classics on Switch, like the stamp mode. The stamp mode, that's a nice feature in the game because it actually provides a sort of single-player campaign, and that's something I would have liked to see in 51 Worldwide Classics, considering things like its local multiplayer shortcomings. I would have liked to see at least something that would be good for me as a single player to enjoy even more in the game, outside of just playing it online. And I think if the exclusive games, too, in the original Clubhouse games, like we're talking about, there's this Hangman-like game called Word Balloon, there's a Battleship-type game. If those games had pulled me in even more, it could have been Personal Game of the Year. Or, if I'd picked it up in a different year with less stiff competition. Either way, I found Clubhouse games on DS to be a quality game, but it didn't revolutionize how I felt about, well, maybe that's a strong word for it, but it didn't get me hyped to play it in the same way that its sequel did. But again, I also think, for as much as I really, really enjoyed the sequel, I think a little bit of what pulled me in is that it was a sequel to a DS game that eluded me, that I wanted to play. So I felt this year I kind of need to check that bias too. As much as I will stand by picking Clubhouse Games 51 Worldwide Classics as my 2020 release of the year, I will acknowledge that I think there's just some pull-in of that DS-ness that really grabbed me with it. And then the last game I have for Personal Game of the Year, I finally sat down and beat Banjo-Kazooie thanks to N64 Switch Online. And I do have to say, it's actually for that reason, though, the fact that I played it on N64 Switch Online, that made me uncomfortable calling it my Personal Game of the Year. I enjoyed it a lot. I have had all kinds of fun with it. It takes up 14 of the 40 hours I've spent on N64 Switch Online. But before I go into why I'm uncomfortable with picking it for Personal Game of the Year, I want to talk a bit about just the game itself, right? It's a super satisfying game to control. But in some ways, it feels like the folks at Rare maybe bit off a little bit more than they can chew, because as soon as the first roll, you have to do button combinations to pull off certain moves. But each move you get is inventive. The Talon Trot, I think, that's the big one. That's the dash of the game, so to speak. It's the ability that lets you move faster. There's all the eggs, and eggs are a really fun move to have because they're a weapon to use against enemies, but they're also used for minor puzzles, but they're also used in environmental mechanisms, if I can speak. So there's just all kinds of different ways you can use them, which is enjoying. But to me, the best part about Banjo-Kazooie, and why I think I like these smaller games better, is each world still felt totally like I could just easily navigate it. I was going to say navigable, but I don't know if that's a real word. I can't really think of a time when I played it where I was like, God, I feel lost. I need a map. In Super Mario Odyssey, thankfully that game has a map built in, but I felt like I needed that sometimes. Not a ton, but just every so often. It was nice to reference it. And that's not to say in Banjo-Kazooie I wouldn't have liked to have it just to have something to reference, but I don't think there was a time where I really felt like, God, I need this just to complete certain areas. Now, I will say I did eventually need a guide just to efficiently complete certain areas. Just to make sure it's like, okay, I found everything, I know where everything, this is where this objective is, this is how I do it. But I don't consider that a huge detriment in this game. And to the point that I played this on Switch, that also means I had access to more or less save states. I think they're formally called like restore points or something, or at least that's what they were on Wii U and Switch, or Wii U and 3DS, I mean. And having those save states did allow certain things like keeping my note totals saved in a given stage, But in the N64 version, if I played it on the cartridge and I own the cartridge, I can play it on original hardware. If I died, or if I left a world in the middle of my run with it, or if I just turned the game off, the note total I had wouldn't be saved. And in fairness, I know in the Xbox 360 version and later re-releases, that issue's fixed, and really the note limitation and the Jinjo collection limitation in Banjo-Kazooie is not by design, but it's more a technical limitation with the Nintendo 64. But as much as I think I would have picked that for personal game of the year, but I don't know if I would have enjoyed Banjo as much as I did if I didn't have modern features like the effective quick save. So I would say, on the whole, I probably enjoyed playing it more than I enjoyed Hypnospace Outlaw, but it had that limitation of, well, it was in this different form that made me uncomfortable giving it my personal game of the year. And plus, like I said, Hypnospace Outlaw made me think. I love Banjo-Kazooie, but I can't say it's necessarily made me, think deeply about a policy, or not even really a policy, but just a way of living life, so to speak. And now we get to Backlog MVP. And we should know what Backlog MVP is now. It is Freedom Planet 2. I saved the reasoning for this section for why it didn't win 2022 Release of the Year. And unfortunately, Freedom Planet 2's big issue for me is just that it did not meet the expectations I had for it. Now, this sort of mini segment within this segment I could see going long because, I don't know, with all the notes I wrote for it, you could almost call it like my first impressions of Freedom Planet 2 or like a mini review, but I don't want to call this a review because I haven't beaten the game, and this is also part of a larger segment. I don't think it's fair to review a game that you haven't beaten. And speaking of things that are unfair, I suppose it could be unfair to say that it just hasn't met my expectations. Because I have famously said that the original Freedom Planet is my favorite independent game. And how can the sequel to that game possibly live up to my expectations for it? Gotta be fair. It is also still the game that I want to go back to the most from 2022. And unlike past Backlog MVPs, I've already started this game. And it's not like Freedom Planet 2 is bad. It just there are just elements, how do I put it? It lacks the satisfaction I got from the first game. I think that's sort of what it is. Freedom Planet 2 is a very satisfying game, or Freedom Planet 1, is a very satisfying game. And Freedom Planet 2 is fun, and it hits some of those highs, but it doesn't hit it every time. There are major elements that I do think are superior in Freedom Planet 2, though. The story, for one thing. It isn't mind-blowing, but I do think it beats the first game story by a large margin because, the first game story is just, alien invasion, we need to beat them and make them leave. And it's not like there are no dramatic points in the story or internal conflicts with the team. But I don't think those moments were written super, super, super well. I still enjoy them, but I know for a fact that was a major flaw for many folks, were those moments outside of just the basic story. But Freedom Planet 2 has higher stakes, and it asks bigger questions than the first game. It asks, it touches on prejudice and racism as themes, which I know are really big themes for a game like it, but it still decides to go to that sort of topic, whereas I would say like the main theme of the first game, which is still an important theme, but I don't know if it's quite as important as what Freedom Planet 2 touches on. It's like heroism. Who can be a hero? Why are you a hero? After all, there's a reason why Lilac is jokingly called by Carol Little Miss Hero Pants in the game, because she wants to be a hero. She becomes a hero. But there's also a question of, is she becoming a hero because she wants to for good, or just because she wants that sort of title, and it's part of why her and Carol come to grips in the first game. Whereas in Freedom Planet 2, they don't have that, but they do have, trying to see what has happened to characters or to species like water dragons. Why is Lilac one of the last water dragons on the planet of Avalis, right? And it's not like there are no internal character conflicts. There's the issue between Carol and Corazon, her sister, and the fact that they have to fight. But that I haven't gotten far enough in the story to really judge that quality yet. And I haven't really gotten far enough in the story to fully judge the way Freedom Planet 2 tackles some of these topics, but I appreciate that it's decided to up the ante in a more global scale. Although I do have to question with it, right? I enjoy the story, but in the original Freedom Planet, you could pick upon booting up the game and starting a file, you could play in adventure mode and see all that stuff, or you could play in classic mode if you don't care about any of that stuff, if you just want to play the game like an old school game. And in Freedom Planet 2, you have to beat one playthrough for sure of adventure mode first to play classic mode. And I thought the fact that they were two options, that was kind of the point, was if you want a classic game in this classic style like it is, in this retro style, you have it. If you want to have all the bells and whistles and, the world map and the adventure aspects and the story and the voice acting, the cutscenes, you have that too. But you can't do that in this game. And isn't player choice usually better when it comes to stuff like that? I think it's a bizarre choice to change that. And actually, speaking of another aspect of the adventure mode, something I brought up in there is the performances, the voice acting. I do think the character performances in Freedom Planet 2 are better than the original. I wouldn't say they're leagues and leagues better, because they are, well, for most of the characters, they're voiced by professional voice actors. But I think they've just honed their characters more in the year. Well, the characters are recorded in 2017, I want to say. So it was only a couple of years after the first Freedom Planet came out, but I think they understand, they had better direction at least, and it shows that they, recorded in a real studio with a voice director, which is what they did. Whereas in the original game, as much as the performances were fine, it's also true that Galaxy Trail didn't have the budget necessarily for the studio like they did in Freedom Planet 2. Let's see. What about graphics? I still love how the original Freedom Planet looks, but I think Freedom Planet 2 is just as much a beautiful game. You could argue it's even more beautiful because there's bigger sprites, there's more detailed sprites. You can zoom in and out with the camera. Or, well, you can't do that, but sometimes you'll have to automatically, the game will automatically zoom you out to have a better view. The characters animate more. There's more detail. And I like how it looks. But I also don't think it's mind-blowingly, amazingly over the top better. I still enjoy the physics. I know it won't please hardcore Sonic fans, but I like Freedom Planet's physics better. I don't like having to run back and forth to try to get up a hill. I like being able to just get up a hill, and I can still do that, and I appreciate that. Let's see. Oh, there's a fourth character. You don't just have Lilac, Carol, and Mila. You also have Nira as a playable character, and I appreciate that quite a bit because it's just another way to play the game. I can't say Nira is my favorite character. Lilac is still my favorite character to play as in that game, but Nira is she's another one that I like. Mila is still at the bottom of the list, but Nira is a solid third place, my third favorite character to play as in that game. Let's see. I liked the cards in Freedom Planet 1. There were 10 collectible cards in each stage that got you art or music or sound effects as unlockables. But I do like how the collectibles have been truncated in Freedom Planet 2 as far as having the Bravestone upgrades and especially the music records, just having those two things in each level. Simplifying things as far as I'm concerned is better. Well, and they're marked on the world map too. I don't have to go out to a menu to see which cards have I collected in a given stage, which ones are still missing. Even though I know they pulled up a number with each one you got, but that doesn't necessarily correlate to, where am I still missing ones. So it's just nice to have something a little simpler, a little easier to understand. And actually, speaking of the world map, there's a world map. That's pretty fun. I that's something that made Super Mario Bros. 3 and Super Mario World better than Super Mario Bros. 1 and 2 is the fact that you could choose stages to play and when to replay them. Well, not really in Super Mario Bros. 3, but definitely in Super Mario World, that latter point holds true in Super Mario Bros. 3. If you finish a level, it's done. You can't go back to it. And I think it's fun. It makes the game feel more like, a video game. Not that Freedom Planet 1 didn't feel like a video game, but it's just a nice little addition. But I should say, speaking of worlds, there are also hub worlds where you can just talk to non-playable characters and navigate around. And those I'm much more ambivalent on. I think they're fine, but I don't think outside of flavor text they really add much to the game for me. Now, as far as why the game didn't draw me in, though, the big one, and again, this could be a little thing, but the music. And this is also probably a little bit unfair because I think the original Freedom Planet has some of the best video game music in general, and that's no joke. And I know some people might call that heresy when there's so many really, really good video game music or video game soundtracks out there, but I think every stage song in that game is to one extent or another an earworm. And I think some of the songs outside of the levels in the original Freedom Planet aren't quite as good, but there's still super catchy music. I adore the menu song from that game, the really calming main menu. The major boss song in that game, fantastic, super catchy. And the title, the credits song, like just the main theme of the game, which kinda a little bit reappears in Freedom Planet 2. I love that song so much. It's so good. And again, Freedom Planet 2 does hit those heights with the music. Sometimes. It doesn't hit it every time. And no song, though, is bad from Freedom Planet 2, but like, Freedom Planet 1 had amazing song after amazing song, and so as a result, it was tough to top it. It was a tough act to follow. And to be fair, though, that might change as I get to some of the later stages. I might find the music in those even more catchy as I play them, but since the music was one of the best aspects of the original Freedom Planet, and I already looked in the OST to see, like, at least to see if some of the music from the beta period I thought was really good would return. I'm glad to see that it did return. It hasn't, not every song has stacked up in the way that I would have hoped it could, and it just is what it is. Let's see. Oh, a feature I know some people really like in games, that's one of my sour points with Freedom Planet 2, is also, it's the ranking system. And for one, it's unclear to me how ranks actually work in Freedom Planet 2, which that's kind of another flaw with the game, is that it doesn't explain all of its systems. And that's not to say that they need like a Mario and Luigi style tutorial where at least for ranks or for any of the other systems where they just go into super detail on and on and on and on about it. But it'd just be nice to kind of have an idea, like, what is the main contributor to my rank? Is it how fast I beat a stage? Is it if I took any damage? Is it the equipment I went into the stage on? Like, how do they mix in for your rank? It'd just be nice to know a little bit. And to me, just ranks, now that I feel like, God, I have to beat every stage with an S rank, not necessarily the rainbow S rank, but just with an S rank, it's an obstacle to 100%, because I could just beat the stages, and if I liked a certain stage, I'll play it again without an incentive in the form of a rank to play it again and improve at it. And, I did that a lot in Freedom Planet 1. I beat Dragon Valley tons and tons and tons of times, and I tried improving my time on it because I thought the stage was fun. I didn't want to get an S rank in the stage or an A rank. I liked it. Another thing, another nitpick is on that topic of like goals and achievements, I suppose. I kind of think the stage par times are a little too strict. They're not too bad by any means. I have beaten a bunch of them without putting in tons and tons of effort, but there is an achievement for each character to beat at least one stage with under half of the par time, and that just sounds impossible. Like, I've beaten stages a minute under the par time, and the idea of getting under half of the times with some of those par times sound like way too much for me. I don't want to get all those achievements, dang it. And, maybe some of the equipment helps with those, like they might shave off time because of equipment you use, but it isn't really clear that would be the case. And maybe beating the game provides you with those power-ups, but again, I haven't seen that yet. As of now, I've struggled with them, and I continue to struggle with those half par times, at least. And actually, speaking of equipment, that's another thing. I think it's interesting in games like Freedom Planet 2, or even something like Mega Man X, but I do get concerned if a platformer, if the game thinks it needs equipment to be more interesting, outside of if the game is like explicitly, I'm a platforming RPG, or I'm a Metroidvania, and collecting equipment is like, those are parts of those games. Because to me, I think in just a raw, regular platformer, or even a speedy platformer like Freedom Planet, I start to worry that maybe the developer isn't confident that the base moveset is interesting, or that the base powers are interesting. And so now we need tons of equipment that could improve the moveset, but I also don't, then the developer doesn't necessarily know which ones are the best ones to include, so they just include all of them and let the player decide. And, to me, that doesn't mean they know what powers would improve the character. And now where it works in a game to me like Mega Man X is there's just a handful of items. You have a couple of Dr. Light capsules, you have a couple of heart containers, and you're done. And to be fair, that is also a flaw I could see in Mega Man X, because I know later games add much, much more equipment than the first game to collect, all the part system and such. And again, that's not definitely not to say that this can't work. And I would say in Freedom Planet 2 it mostly works. It's just, this is a concern I have in a vacuum, is, are you confident enough in your moveset to just make what it is and leave what it is? Because a lot of the modifications with equipment are really just background modifications, but I guess you could also see that as detrimental, because there's probably an ultimate setup to move to use for the game, even though it doesn't necessarily actually change your moveset. I don't know. I don't like sitting in menus, buying equipment, or going on a wild goose chase to find equipment. And I'm talking primarily about the stuff like the Brave Stones and the potions here in this case is what they are in Freedom Planet 2. When I could just play the stage. Why do I want to sit in menus picking equipment to enhance myself for the stage when I should be able to beat the stage without any of those and have fun without any of those, and just have fun without it? If I want to consider equipment choices, if I want to explore the world for them, I have action-adventure games for that. I have role-playing games for that. And again, that's not to say they can't work. And I also think there's probably some personal preference shining through in my consideration that it might not be that Brave Stones and potions are ideal. But I'm just not convinced that Freedom Planet 2 necessarily sticks the landing on it as an idea, because I often forget I even have the equipment to use. I'll just go on the stage and play it. And then it's like, oh yeah, I could have maybe done better on that, or, had more health or something if I used the Brave Stones or the potions, and I didn't. Now, my final critique, and to me this is the major gameplay death knell for Freedom Planet 2, and I'm being overdramatic using that word. It's just to me it's the major biggest problem I have with the game is, a critique from someone that I respect a lot. I'm thinking of EPG here, Exo Paradigm Gamer, of the first Freedom Planet, is that he thinks the stages in that game are too big and too bloated. And clearly I disagree with him, because I adore the original Freedom Planet. The only stage that I think maybe comes close to being bloated in Freedom Planet 1 is Battle Glacier. I mean, that's not to say that it's not a valid critique. If he thinks the stages are too big, he thinks the stages are too big. In fact, I would say I think his reasoning for it is solid. When the par time for Battle Glacier is 12 minutes, it might be time to pare back the stage length. And I'm not convinced that 6 minutes for a stage is egregious like he is, but if you're having fun for all that time, at least. But your mileage will definitely vary on that. I can beat stages in that game in a couple minutes, and I don't find 6 minutes to be too long for most stages. But I may be in the minority on that too. Now, Freedom Planet 2, I think it does have pretty bloated levels. And part of that is because of the treasure chests hidden in the levels. It has at least one treasure chest with equipment, and then the rest, other than the one that has the vinyl for the music player, the rest just have like knickknacks. So those need to be spread in the level. But the odd thing is, remember in Freedom Planet 1, there's those 10 collectible cards. So there's fewer collectibles in Freedom Planet 2's levels, yet the stages are larger and longer. And maybe it isn't even the collectibles. Maybe it's just because as a sequel, we need to have a bigger game, and therefore it is a betterer game. But a game doesn't have to be bigger, or longer even, to be a better game than their prior game. If anything, it could have been bigger and longer through just having more stages, but I find myself taking longer to beat stages and then not having as much fun with them as a result. And also a nitpick on the collectibles, since I brought them up. You can't check if you found all the collectibles in a stage from within the stage. And like I said, a level will have multiple treasure chests, so even if you find a couple chests in the level, one of them might not be the one that has the collectible that's marked on the map for it. And to be fair, okay, there's been plenty of updates since I last played the game, so maybe an update has fixed that, but I'd like to be able to see, did I get the treasure chest I need to get before I go back to the world map, and then find out that I haven't, and then I need to go play the stage again. But I think what also contributes to the bloat in Freedom Planet 2 is that while stages feel more open, they also feel a little bit more closed. Like in Dragon Valley, right? There are now these like leaf walls in the stages you have to destroy to progress. And then there's time to progress where like suddenly we've gone from going left to right to having this sudden vertical section, which then goes back to being left and right, which breaks the pace a little bit. And these don't sound like major problems, but I find, obstacles like the leaves to break the flow, and the same for the switches in the second level, Shenlin Park. I have to grab onto the switch and then wait for it to pull down and wait for the door to open up, and that takes time when I just want to keep going and going and going. And on stage layout, even though the stages are larger, outside of getting collectibles, I would say I haven't felt all that lost in Freedom Planet 2, and that's good, because I don't like being lost in games. But I do find that, in line with Freedom Planet 2's inspiration, which is still clearly Sonic the Hedgehog. I know they want to get outside of that mold, but Sonic is still certainly an influence on the game. It borrows the philosophy of we're going to have speedy sections and platforming sections, and the speedy sections are like your reward for beating those platforming sections. But, Freedom Planet 2 has all the extra side quests. And that's not to say Sonic's perfect, because it also has side quests in like the special stages, and I hate the special stages, and getting to the special stages is a pain in the rear end, but in Freedom Planet 2, I think the flow can be kind of broken up by, needing to find an inconveniently placed treasure chest in a route, or now there's suddenly a wall because now you need to use an ability to find like wires to climb across, or you need to find a drill to drill through the ground, like in Phoenix Highway. I don't remember which. I don't think it's technically the 4th or 5th level, but it's somewhere along that line. Might even be the 6th or 7th for all I know. And that again goes back to my issue with the par times, and especially like the half par time badges, is just things take longer, and I just want to keep going. I could keep going into more. Like I could talk about the guard mechanic and how that's another thing I kind of forget most of the time, but I think I've spent enough time on this game. And, you know, in fact, the notes on this might be larger than the rest of the notes I have. And clearly I've critiqued the game a lot. I have a lot of things that I don't like about it, but it's still the game I most want to go back to. It's not a game that I feel obligated to go back to. It's a game that I want to go back to because I think it has enough fun. It's still at its base a fun, fast-paced 2D platformer like I want to play. But these issues just hold it back from me from being the 10 out of 10 game. Well, maybe it's not really a 10 out of 10, but you know, a game that I really adore and love, like the original. Some other games that I have nominated for Backlog MVP. We have The Great Ace Attorney 2 Resolve. So in 2022, I did finish The Great Ace Attorney Adventures in The Great Ace Attorney Chronicles, and I thought the ending of Adventures was kinda underwhelming. Now, appropriately enough, it did feel like I was only halfway through a story, which makes sense because there was a sequel to finish all the threads from the first game. But I felt kind of deflated after beating The Great Ace Attorney Adventures because... And don't take this to mean that it's bad, but, you know, even in the worst Ace Attorney games, I do find that each one ends with a major feeling of closure in the story. And I didn't get that with The Great Ace Attorney Adventures. Again, that doesn't mean it's a bad game, but I wanted that closure to feel like satisfied that, yes, this adventure is over. And I didn't get that with Adventures. Instead of feeling like I'm opening up a new story with Resolve and being excited to see the new things that were going to happen, or being excited just because I had a rush from that satisfying ending, I felt kind of like I was going through the motions that, oh, well, time to keep going on. And, you know, that actually, The Great Ace Attorney 2 is a game that I have also started, and I'm excited to see the new things that will happen regardless, but I haven't really felt compelled to continue it because Adventures just kind of just left me like, oh, well, that's a game, that's a story. I also want to mention, speaking of twos, I want to mention Dragon Quest 2. I started the original Dragon Quest when I got the collection of the remakes. Well, the re-releases, the remasters maybe is the best word for it. I don't know, the graphically enhanced versions on Switch in late 2021? No, maybe it was late 2020. Either way, I got the collection at some point in that time frame, and I beat almost all of Dragon Quest in December, and then I promptly put the game down and finally decided at the end of 2021 to beat it, because I only had like an hour to go. It was like the last dungeon, and that was it. And so then I started Dragon Quest 2, and though I'm not nearly as far in that because it's literally like a double the length game from the first game, I found that I did pretty much the same thing. I beat a bunch of it, and then I stopped. And I want to make the gaps between some of my games shorter so I can actually beat some of them, especially if I want to get to even longer role-playing games like Dragon Quest IV and beyond. And like I said, those are much longer. And I want to go back to it. Another game, the last game in Bandai Namco's stellar 2022 for me, the Klonoa Fantasy Reverie series. I was so excited when that game was announced because Klonoa is back. There's a new game, even though it was just a remake of old games, but it's like a new Klonoa branded video game. And I played the first stage of Klonoa Door to Phantomile, and then I promptly put the game down. You know, for as much as I enjoy Klonoa, and I do think it's an artistically fascinating series. The problem I've had with it is the games are also pretty slow. And to be fair, that's part of the idea for the series, is to be methodical, because they're somewhat puzzle-oriented, especially the handheld games. And I think the platform, but I think the platformers that draw me in are the ones with speed or impressive acrobatics, and Klonoa doesn't have that. It does have the story and the world building that draws me in, but, and I want to pay respects to it by beating the games in the Fantasy Reverie series, but it just didn't quite hook me like I wanted to, so it's ended up being a backlog game, unfortunately. And then finally, a game that came out of nowhere, one that I want to play more in 2023, is Obakedoro. Obakedoro is a game that how do I put it? Actually, why don't I go back by discussing a little bit of the history of how I found that game? I think that might lead me to how I want to describe this. You might not have heard of the game, and I hadn't necessarily heard of it either, because it was a game that came out in 2021, but it didn't really get a ton of fanfare. But in October 2022, leading up to Halloween, Obakedoro was a game trial on Switch Online. And the long and short of game trials is just, hey, you can try out this game for a few days for free, and you'll even get 100 platinum points for playing it. And normally when it comes to those game trials, I'll just play it just to get the 100 points. Or maybe I'll have some legitimate interest in the game. And Obakedoro was a game that ended up being I'm just going to play it for 100 points, and then I ended up really enjoying it. So the long and short of it, actually I should also point out, you do get the games for half off if you buy it during the game trial, and then I ended up buying it, so first successful sale on that for Nintendo so far. The long and short of Obakedoro, now that I want to focus on the design, is you have two teams in the game, a team of 3 humans and a single ghost player. And this is why it came out on Halloween, because it's ghost. It's Halloween-y, kind of, sort of. And if the humans can evade the ghost for like 3 minutes or so and free their captured teammates if their teammates happen to be caught by the ghost, then the human team wins the game. In that sense, it really isn't all that different from a game like Pac-Man Versus or even like Mario Chase in Nintendo Land, but I am a sucker for games like those asymmetrical multiplayer games. Whereas obviously on the other side, if the ghost catches all 3 players, then they win. And, hats off to, I want to point it out, because it was a game that came out of nowhere for me in 2022, and I ended up having fun with it. And my last word on before moving on through it, though, is it could be a tough game to play for at least the next couple of weeks still, because it is primarily an online game. So first off, I need internet to play it, but also because it's not, I don't think it's quite an indie game, but it seems like it's in that realm. And since it's a small game that's primarily online, and because it's not actually seasonal, but I think the Halloween-y horroriness might make it seem a little seasonal to some people, I might have a tough time finding lobbies, which is a shame, because I thought Obakedoro is a sincerely super fun game. So that covers all the Game of the Year stuff. 2022 is a fun year for games. It had surprises. It had in both positive and negative ways. But I look forward to seeing what 2023 has. Hopefully, more original games that I want to play. That would be a really nice change of pace for a year, because I've kind of gotten tired of just saying, I didn't play a lot of original stuff over the last 2 years, but we'll have to see what happens. Not much has been announced yet for 2023, at least for stuff that I'm interested in. So, here's to 2022. I had fun. Hopefully, this year can be even better. And that finally brings me to the 2022 wrap-up. 2022 was as far as it being a personal year, it was a pretty bizarre year. You know, it had a lot of big personal things happening for me. I graduated college. I moved out of my parents' homes, and I started a full-time job. And on top of that, you know, I had plenty of enjoyment out of my main hobby, if the last segment was any indication. But when I think of 2022, I think of it as kind of being a hollow year for me. I mean, I certainly had fun doing things like the few times I recorded for this or the other podcast I did, you know, for my student organization. And for as much as I found college frustrating, I mean, the act of education is itself fulfilling to me. And I also enjoy a lot of the aspects of my job that I'm currently working. And though I can never say I'll love every single person I work with, there are people there that I would genuinely want to add to my friend group, and I hope they'd want to do the same. But I also think it's true that it took me 5 months to find a job, and that interim period of having to continue doing like menial grunt work in comparison, while still earning myself income, and very much being a real job, kind of going to that theme I had earlier of it, like, you know, it's not like a legitimate job, I guess, to people, which is ridiculous. But, you know, it's a real job. And there's social stigma with it that comes to, you know, looking at earlier work as being like unworthy, I find. And, you know, that's on top of things like, you know, when people believe that my area of study, being poli-sci, isn't, you know, the most valuable. And then there's also the fact that I've never been great at making friends, and I struggled to do so in college, and now I can't say I have too much social interaction either. Well, plus, though I've never been like formally diagnosed and with such a thing, and to be crystal clear before I even say something like this, I do believe that self-diagnosis in the realms of like mental illness or mental conditions is, I think it's a pretty despicable thing to do, because I find that it diminishes the folks that really are diagnosed and struggle for sure with some kind of illness to do, because I don't want to look at a self-diagnosis as a crutch for poor behavior I may have, and so I'm not going to do that here. But, you know, there's definitely some. It feels like I have some anxiousness surrounding social interaction and trying to do that, or at the very least, you know, I find I exhibit certain behaviors that make it difficult to form and maintain friendships. So, you know, just some of the ways I behave socially made it tough in 2022 as well. But I'd be lying, you know, if I said I don't feel like I have an underlying fear or anxiety that causes me to behave the way I do, which that itself just perpetuates a cycle of guilt surrounding those kinds of actions, which I guess then you could say it causes further issues like a lack of desire to do individually fulfilling things like this recording. But you know, I guess if I had to characterize my own individual 2022, it was an important professional step forward, but a personally isolating year. And, you know, I saw a post where somebody said that a man meaning men like me, will start a podcast before they go to therapy. And I should say, when I wrote the notes for that section, I was like, geez, am I in that group too? But rationally, I know that like when people really need help, they should get it. And I would get it if I was really in like a super, super terrible need. And, you know, that's not to say that I wouldn't be interested in getting help, but I don't think doing this was an alternative to that. I think doing this is genuinely, I enjoy media and I enjoy talking about the things that I love. So I spend most of my time talking about that. This sort of topic is different because it's a wrap-up year. And so as a result, I'm sort of obligated to talk about that. And then, of course, there's all the game news I missed out on reporting this year, because for a large part of it, I had no studio. And then from moving in here to now, and that like kind of isolation and lack of motivation as a result I talked about, kind of prevented me from talking about that. But I want to pay respects to at least some of the major gaming news here before I move on to the more global wrap-up. Every few months, for example, a certain controversial downloadable content received an update, and I'm of course talking about the Mario Kart 8 Deluxe Booster Course Pass. I plan to go more into my thoughts on this DLC in the next episode, but the long and short of my feelings on the Mario Kart 8 Deluxe Booster Course Pass is that I've greatly enjoyed each wave of tracks, and yet while folks have found themselves progressively enjoying each wave more, I've been kind of the opposite, not quite the opposite, I guess. I would say wave 2 for me is the best, then wave 1, then I think wave 3 is the weakest. Even though I know there are objective improvements in each wave, and I still enjoy wave 3 quite a bit. I think maybe the magic of having new tracks has gotten lesser and lesser each time, even with objective improvements between wave 1 to 2 and 2 to 3. But, you know, it is what it is. We'll see what happens later this year when wave 4 comes out. Let's see. Switch Online, it got its own little app on the Switch console in April, and as dumb as this is, I have to say I found myself fairly addicted to obtaining the new user icons you can make in exchange for platinum points on this app. I mean, I've skipped a bunch of icons from games that I could receive, but like for games I care about, like Super Mario Odyssey, I've collected pretty much all of them, because that's what I need in my life, is another way to feed my collecting habit. Let's see, I've talked a lot about Switch Sports. That came out, and it was subject to what I would call is kind of needless scrutiny. And, well, needless might be a bit of a strong word, but, I think it's been unfairly critiqued in some ways. And I plan to talk about that in the next episode as well. But, I think the discussion I had on the game earlier kind of shows that I think it's a pretty strong game, and I find myself agreeing with the critics with some design choices, but I can't stand by all the criticism that Nintendo Switch Sports has received. Another thing, E3 got canceled again, and it's looking more and more likely to me that E3 is just going to continue not mattering for better or worse. And, wouldn't you know, literal days before I started recording this, the three console makers have all announced that they're not going to be attending E3 in 2023 either. So my theory seems to be, well, I shouldn't say it's really my theory, but this educated opinion, I guess, has started to prove more and more valid each year. Let's see. The second Sonic movie came out, and I also need to see that. And on top of that, Sonic just had a huge 2022 because there's also Sonic Origins, which was supposed to be really good, but it ended up having some controversy surrounding it, and it was underwhelming for many. And then Sonic Frontiers, of course, came out and succeeded for its main audience at being a good modern 3D Sonic game, and I think it blew away the expectations of some people. Speaking of Sega, Sega also announced and released a second Sega Genesis Mini, but this one focused more on Sega CD games than it did on Genesis games. I mean, there are Genesis games on it, but it's more so a Sega CD celebration than anything else. I want to pick it up. I don't know if I will, because it seems like it had a much more limited release. I never even got the original Genesis Mini, let alone some of the other mini consoles, but I would like to obtain some of those because I like them. I'm going to have a little bit of anniversary discussion here, but one of the first big ones, Atari turned 50 in 2022, which means, geez, gaming is getting old. And in celebration, Atari also released a collection for their anniversary, and apparently it's the best thing Atari's done in years. I want to pick it up. I haven't quite gotten around to it yet, but I want to get some appreciation for some of the very earliest games and some of the earliest developer in-games, some of their later releases. Apparently VHS collecting also became a thing in 2022. It doesn't sound like it's really a real thing, but it's a thing that people are using to make money on. I like VHSs, but I can't foresee myself collecting them, but apparently that must be a new thing. Let's see, Nintendo acquired an animation studio. They're now literally named Nintendo Pictures, and this is the studio that worked with them on the Pikmin short movies, which I liked quite a bit. But we haven't really seen anything since the acquisition, so hopefully something comes of this purchase, but there just haven't been any projects announced yet. This is a piece that I wouldn't normally report on, especially because I've never played this game, but I think a culturally significant change for some folks my age, and especially those younger than me, is the fact that the oof sound was removed from Roblox. And I mostly care about this because it's because of Tommy Tallarico of Television Amico fame. And there he is causing yet another problem for an innocent game project. Not that the folks at Roblox are necessarily hurting without the oof sound, but I mean, come on, man. Come on, Tommy. That was a major joke for people online for years, especially in my age demographic, and now it's been unceremoniously removed because it came off of a disc that you guys recorded. I mean, the heck, man. Here's a big one for me. Embracer Group bought limited run games. And now I haven't seen a huge change, fortunately, in their practices, but I do hope that it doesn't result in limited run becoming a worse business because now they're owned by a larger corporation. And I know people have problems with limited run, especially recently, because it takes so long for them to actually get their games to customers. And trust me, I am upset about it too, because it took me 8 months. It took them 8 months to get me Demon Turf on Switch. And that's a game that I, was supposedly going to have in hand 4 to 6 months after its order period ended. Instead, it took an extra 2. And I don't know. As much as I'm frustrated about that, I can't be quite with other people because I simply find the fact that I can get physical copies of smaller games to be such a boon, because those games are more often than not finished, and then they won't need updates when in the future. So just having it on cartridge to me it's huge. I love it. I adore having it. It's just so much more beneficial, and it makes the 2007 kid, the nostalgic kid in me who had to have every DS game on a cartridge because it couldn't download stuff until the DSi, which I never had. It makes that kid inside me happy. Let's see, what else? Let's go over some more of the anniversaries. Super Mario Kart turned 30, and if I had time, that would have been another game that I would have added to if I were to continue doing the Gaming Birthday Extravaganza series. Because, it's Mario Kart. Mario Kart's phenomenal. It's amazing. And I would say it was a major missed opportunity on my part to not make an episode on that, because now I'm going to have to wait till 2027 if I want to do that. Only 5s and 0s, remember. I like that policy. So regardless, happy birthday to Mario Kart, and happy birthday to the kart racing genre as a whole, really. And there are plenty other of anniversaries I missed. I should just list... Well, I talked about Atari earlier, but I want to list some more of them now. Mega Man's 35. Street Fighter's 35, actually, speaking of Capcom series that started in 1987. Super Mario Sunshine came out in 2002. It's 20 years old now. The Switch itself is 5 years old, which is insane to me that it's been around for half a decade, because it has not felt that long. Pitfall, Ms. Pac-Man, those are classic arcade games that are 40 now. Let's see. Oh, Final Fantasy is also 35 as well. Sonic 2, that's 30 years old. Of course, Kirby's 30. That's why Kirby and the Forgotten Land even came out in 2022. Let's see. Another series that turned 30 in 2022 is Mortal Kombat, which I can't say I've played some of these series. Obviously, I've played a bunch of them, but Mortal Kombat's especially one that I've ever played. But, that had a huge significance on the gaming landscape, at the very least in North America. And there's tons and tons more that I could add, but that's just a small handful of the games that turned 30 or not 30, but just had an anniversary in 2022. Let's see. Oh, and there was the September Farm Nintendo Direct Nintendo Direct itself. It was just filled with farming games for whatever reason. There were definitely highlights in it at the time for me. Switch Sports' golf update being shown off a little bit. That was something for me. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe's Booster Course Pass Wave 3. And the huge one. There was not a ton that I loved in that Direct. But, Pikmin 4 is real. We saw Pikmin 4. Pikmin 4 is a real game. Pikmin 4 is supposed to come out in 2023. and I adored Pikmin 3 when it came out. So I'm really hoping. I hate to do this again, considering what happened with Freedom Planet 2, but I would bet good money if it actually comes out in 2023, Pikmin 4 will be my 2023 release of the year. I have very little doubts about that because it looks, I'm excited to have new Pikmin stuff, and I hope it keeps the really good stuff about Pikmin 3 that I loved, especially that Go Here feature. That better be there, that cop pad, even though I don't have a gamepad like in the Wii U version to use. I want to see that return. Here's a possibly sad one. Google Stadia was finally announced to be ending, and as of recently, the service is actually shut down. Now, fortunately, Google did make good on a few things with it. People got refunds, which is huge. That was something that we weren't sure would happen when Google Stadia was first announced, and people were afraid that what happened to it is what ended up happening to it. But people got their money back, and that's good. Google made good on that. They even released, briefly, toward the end of Stadia's existence, a snake game that they used to test Google Stadia with, and that I find fun. That's something that I'm glad ended up getting preserved, if only for a little brief window of time. Let's see. Oh, here's another huge one. The Super Mario Brothers movie. First off, that's the name of the movie. But it also finally got trailers, and I don't want to go too much into that here. At this point, I plan to do an episode leading up to that movie's release on my feelings on the movie so far. It'll probably just be a creative outlet bonus since it's probably going to be the sole topic of the episode, but, I'm definitely interested to see what happens there. And you can also expect a review after I've seen the movie as well. Let's see, is there anything else on this list I really want to talk about? I have more, but I think I've covered a lot of the major stuff. Just 2022 was huge. There's so much more I could mention, but it's crazy how much you miss when you don't record for 6 months on end, and even just miss stuff during the earlier part of the year. But I think I'm ready to do the final wrap-up. I have been going on for about 2 hours here, and I need to do the final greater global wrap-up. And before I read off this list, and I don't plan to do as much commentary on this list, I just plan to read it off for the most part and inject a little bit where I feel is really necessary. Keep this in mind. I put together a partial list. And this doesn't include things that have happened in January 2023. So here's the list of significant news items that I saw in 2022, largely in chronological order, but I think I slotted a couple things in as I thought of them when I was writing this list. As far as like global, more political type news, since I'm a poli-sci person. Here are things that happened in 2022. There was the COVID-19 Omicron variant. There's been economic inflation just across the board in food, housing, gas. Pretty much anything you can think of, and it's had inflated prices. And then there's the Federal Reserve response in the U.S. of just continually raising interest rates, and not quite. I don't know if I would say they're trying to cause a recession, but they could be headed toward that if they're not careful. I would be super remiss if I didn't say, hey, there's kind of like this war that started in the Ukraine and Russia, and now there's been concerns of the U.S. and other countries as they keep sending weapons to them over time, and possible fears that it could escalate to a nuclear war. I would really hope that doesn't happen, but it's certainly possible. In positive news, for me as somebody who leans a little more left, Ketanji Brown Jackson ended up on the Supreme Court of the United States, right? There was fears that Joe Biden would pick a more centrist-y person for the court, but he ended up picking Ketanji Brown Jackson, and that makes me very happy. Her past as a public defender, for example, one thing that I find huge for her. There was a rail strike. There wasn't. There didn't end up being a rail strike, but there could have been a rail strike, which would have caused all kinds of things to break down in the U.S., but that's a large industry of people who ended up having their strike broken by the Congress. And I can't say that was a decision that I would be very happy with if I was them. In fact, I think their reaction of being very upset about it is pretty reasonable. Other things. Oh, student loan debt forgiveness. That's supposed to happen, but it didn't end up quite happening because now it has to go through the courts because the right found the one person who wouldn't be affected by this change necessarily in a fully positive way. Because of course they did. There was live golf. Live golf is a huge thing as somebody who, like, again, I enjoy golf. I don't love watching it, but I mean, I'm glad that, you know, the sport in theory has an alternative source to watch. I'm not super jazzed that it's as a result of an authoritarian country in the Middle East. I'm of course talking about Saudi Arabia. I can't say the regime that hosts it is exactly who I would want to be the ones leading the charge on it. What else? Oh, we had a rare example of protests in China. I'm talking about when they were protesting the zero COVID policy. Like China, you're talking about another authoritarian country. The fact that there was a protest there against Xi Jinping, that's massive. That's something that I would not have expected to happen. Now, it did get cracked down on, although they also did get results, which again, huge. An authoritarian president was protested for removal, and that protest caused change instead of the regime doubling down on it. When does that ever happen in an authoritarian regime? Like, seriously. What else? Elon bought Twitter. Didn't really affect me because I don't use Twitter, but he did buy it. And it's been interesting watching it. Probably the elephant in the room that I haven't brought up yet. The Dobbs decision overturned Roe v. Wade in the United States, and then there was the leak of that decision to go along with it. So people had to prepare for a month of that happening, and then it happened, overturning 50 years of precedent. And then on top of that, there's the implications for gay marriage being overturned, which I think the Respect for Marriage Act has kind of quashed that, but not fully. I'm not fully up to date with it, but I don't think it quite perfectly keeps gay marriage legal in the way that it has been, by which I just mean my understanding is that there are carve-outs for religious groups to say they would not perform a gay marriage, which is upsetting, but if that's the difference between getting the act passed and not, and enshrining gay marriage into law, I guess that's better. Well, and then there's the contraception implications too. The fact that the access to that contraception is legal, and just the fact that, you know, privacy in people's personal lives could be overturned. That's concerning as well. We had a baby formula shortage. Let me just say I'm very glad that I'm not a new parent now, because with a shortage of baby formula of all things, I mean, come on. That's rough. That's incredibly rough. We had a couple of mass shootings in 2022, because what would a year in the United States be without a mass shooting? We had one in Buffalo, New York. And just in general, Buffalo had a rough year when you include like the snow on top of that. And then, not to talk about 2023, but, you know, the recent Damar Hamlin thing for the Bills fans there. I mean, just Buffalo's had a rough go of it lately. And speaking on shootings, there was the Uvalde, Texas shooting. But it does seem like we've at least had some resulting gun legislation, which is huge. What else on this list? I have a lot more on this list, but I think I might need to skip some of it. Mar-a-Lago was raided for classified documents, and wouldn't you know, then later Joe Biden and Mike Pence were found to have classified documents as well. Really? I mean, I cannot believe that people in power think, yeah, I can just take this document with me. You know, whether you think foreign actors really ever saw those, and obviously the Mar-a-Lago of Donald Trump ones are clearly the worst of the bunch because there's so much more, and he just kept whatever he wanted. But just the fact that 3 people who formerly had a presidency or a vice presidency took documents that are classified is just mind-boggling. The gall to do that. It's crazy. What else on this list do I want to talk about? I think I've covered most of it. I mean, there's still the midterm elections. The fact that the red wave didn't materialize, even though the Republicans still won the House, like, that's massive. Even take my ideological leanings outside of it. The fact that, historical trends were bucked because the party in power is just supposed to lose across the board in a midterm election in the United States. The fact that did not happen, that's massive. That's a huge change. The fact that ticket splitting seemed to return for some folks on ballots, that itself also huge. Absolutely massive. I cannot put into words how massive that is because those things just haven't happened in a long time. We haven't seen those things happen in the US. And there's a chance that those things could be happening again. And I'm not saying I would be super interested in seeing it continue, but just the fact that it happened is huge. Well, actually, I take that back. I think I would be interested in seeing it continue, even if it doesn't necessarily make results that I would want all the time. It's just good to see that, things are changing, hopefully for the better. Geez, I think I'm going to cut it off there. There's just so much more I could have mentioned. There's tons of stuff I cut out off of this list, and just look at all the things that happened. I mean, that's 2022 for you. That was just a busy, humongous year. Though it was not a busy, humongous year for the Creative Outlet podcast, but this is the first one of 2023. I'm going to conclude this episode here. I've been going on for about 2 hours, 3 minutes or so. I think I'm ready to call it quits. Although, who knows, I might have edited this a little bit, taken out some pauses, taken out some stuff. It might be shorter than 203, but we'll just have to see in the final. Just absolutely crazy. Crazy 2022. I'm hoping 2023 is going to be better, as it should be. Maybe less crazy, maybe a little bit more of a snooze fest on the global realm, but a more busy Creative Outlet podcast year. That's where things need to be busier. But until then, please, folks, engage. Likes, comments, subscriptions, Anchor.fm voice messages. That'd be great. I still want one of those messages. But until then, I look forward to seeing you in the next episode, which, again, I already have planned, so we're making headway there. And I will see you folks then. Thank you for listening in. It's been a pleasure to return to this media hobby as I want to keep.